All right, welcome everybody. My name is Kara Starnes. I am the founder of Safe Passage. Today we are here to discuss child trafficking. And if you have any doubt whether or not CDWs are coming across child trafficking, I want to assure you, you are coming across these victims. So we are here today. We're going to be talking about recognizing, responding to child trafficking, and the services that are available today. So I really want to thank Jimmy and everybody who was involved in putting this training together. We have personally worked with children coming out of the courts, coming through a CDW office who have been sexually trafficked and exploited. So when Jimmy gave me the call, I just knew I had to do this training. This is a remote training. I know remote can feel very impersonal. It can be easy to multitask. And so I was researching ways to engage the audience in a remote setting. And I found on the TED Talks that apparently you have a higher chance at engaging the audience if you put up a photo of your family. As for me, I am 30 years old and single. I do have a cat. To complicate matters further, I inherited her and I am a dog person. So I will not be the 30-year-old single lady putting her cat on the PowerPoint, but I do have a good sense of humor that hopefully will keep you very engaged through this presentation today. And I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your schedules to really give your whole heart to this training. I received a phone call just about 2 months ago from the latest case coming from a CDW office. And she's probably watching this. She's incredible. And, you know, she was really advocating for that child. And she said to me, Kara, this girl is 16 years old, and she only wants to be a drug dealer and a prostitute, and she does not care if she dies. And these are the types of phone calls that we get at Safe Passage. We are seeing trafficked youth are being kind of spit out by the system because the system is so done with them. They have no more runs through the group home, through the system, through the programs. I had a phone call from a mother last year who said, you know, my daughter has been through every program that Louisville has to offer. And the last one is about to, you know, terminate her services because they're done with her. And she said, what makes your program different? And I said, well, you know, Mom, we don't call it program, because when teenagers are 16 years old and calling their own shots in life, thinking they have found the way they want to live because that's the way that trauma is spinning the narrative of their life, we don't call it program because they've been through program and it hasn't worked. What we do is we come through a mentorship kind of angle. And so, you know, when these kids, when clinical hasn't worked, we're not a replacement for those services and we encourage those services. But when clinical hasn't worked and we come through on mentorship, it's something they're extremely receptive to. It's using something called TBRI, trust-based relational intervention, and it comes down, it brings the service down to the youth level, and we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking a lot about recognizing the signs of child trafficking as well as our services, just so you know what you have to lean on in the community. And I really want to assure you guys, you are coming across trafficked youth. So Safe Passage has been around for about 4 years. I am the founder and the president. We do many things in the community. We have training, just like what we're doing today. We have student prevention. We're going into the high schools and middle schools and talking to youth about sexual abuse and human trafficking. That is powerful. In fact, we've presented multiple times to the street law programs for the CDW offices and helping students to know about sexual abuse, to not carry shame, secrecy, and isolation for the rest of their life, but able to actually walk students through telling someone for the first time in their life. That's incredible. We also talked to them about child trafficking and what does it look like when someone's never been kidnapped, what is happening today with the grooming on social media, and really helping vulnerable youth to recognize that someone who says, you can come and stay with me, we're just gonna, sell our bodies and do this kind of stuff, this is child trafficking. So teaching students to recognize that. But the heart of what we do is our family support services, and this is where we work with families who do have a child who's been impacted by child trafficking or exploitation. A little bit about our survivors. We do serve boys. That is a frequent question. In the last year, I believe we've had 2 referrals and have worked with 2 of those boys. We serve ages 11 to 19 in that range. Our referral sources come from absolutely all over, including the CDW offices. We really value your all's work and your all's partnership. And I have valued every conversation I've had with you guys. You guys truly advocate for those youth. So we are located primarily in Louisville, but we do try to serve youth as far as we can because we do have a mentorship model. We cannot always serve youth outside of 90 kind of miles in our range. We try to. If we get a referral in an outside area, we work with partners in the community to try and identify a good mentor in the area. So we can't, our hub is Louisville, Lexington, New Albany kind of area, but if you do have a trafficked youth outside those areas, call us. It never hurts. We can't always do something. We always do our best though. Stages of crisis, about 85% were actually trafficked. About 15% of our referrals were being seriously groomed or sexually exploited. We're going to go through some of those terms today. So our approach is supporting the child and the family, because by the time we get a youth 16 years old who's been trafficked, the trafficking did not start yesterday, okay? It's the trauma started 4, 5, 6 years ago when they're 12, when they're 8, when they're on the internet, when they're sneaking out, when they're drinking, when they're being sexually abused. So we support the family because by the time we get the youth, the family is just on their last thread. And so these are some of the things that we provide for our families. We're going through very quickly today. Jimmy, well, this is going into recording. You have my slides. There you go. So our mentorship program, working with these youth, it is so beautiful. Here are some of the quotes from the youth that we have been working with. We had a 16-year-old in the fall go to her counseling office at high school. And she said to her counselor, I've been selling my body for years and I want to stop. I want a normal life. So it is absolutely insane what these youth have gone through. And so we provide a mentorship model and come in and support them on a weekly basis. We're an additional service to everything clinical that's going on. This is one of our survivors. As you can see, we're in a hotel room waiting placement. We have food for her. We're encouraging her. She's a runner. She's an addict. She has Stockholm syndrome, is bonded to her trafficker, was wanting to run and go back to him. And so we just step in and kind of fill those gaps that maybe a social worker or a cop can't fill and try to support them. And it's you can see I'm not wearing professional clinical clothes. I'm coming down to their level, making them feel comfortable. Yes, we talked about the pineapple pizza. I was concerned. So our whole goal here is to break the loop of trauma, because the adverse childhood experiences survey tells us that if a child has trauma and doesn't get the right kind of help, guess what? Trauma repeats in various and numerous ways throughout the rest of their lifetime. And so we use prevention programs to try and reach vulnerable youth before the trafficking happens. We use intervention programs when the trafficking is going on, and helping them. So prevention, not letting them even go on the ramp. Intervention, helping them take the off ramp and hopefully never re-enter that roadway, that cycle of trauma. So this is why we take kind of a three-pronged approach to what we do. A quick slide on who we serve. There are, trafficking is a moving target. It is changing. And so to answer your question, yes, we serve all the many forms and many stages of trafficking. And this is just a quick kind of referral list that you can take a look at of who we serve, in addition to the 12 to 19 boys and girls, Louisville, Lexington, kind of surrounding areas. As you look at this list, you might realize, oh, I need to make a phone call to Kara today. We'd love to hear from you. So I just wanted to, before we get into the heavy work, explain very quickly what we do. We've been around for 4 years, and this is our website at any time. My phone number, my email is up there, and so you can, making a referral is very, very easy. So today we're going to be talking about how this is happening without kids ever being kidnapped. How is this happening without the extreme scenarios that we see on Netflix and the movie Taken and all that kind of stuff? And I want to begin by just the technical definition so that you have those with you. And then we're going to get kind of off of the jargony, all that kind of stuff, and spend more time painting a very realistic, relatable picture to what you're probably seeing every day. And so human trafficking happens when someone is subjected to forced labor, services, or sexual activity through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So that is the definition that our KRS statute actually uses as well. And to provide further distinction, you know, a lot of people ask me, what is the difference between sexual abuse and sex trafficking? And when and how does the line cross over? And the way I kind of break it down is, in an abuse case, the perpetrator is abusing and using the victim, but they're not necessarily organizing or receiving a transactional benefit. Okay? In a trafficking case, the perpetrators are profiting, they're benefiting through some type of transaction that they perceive to be something of value. And that's going to be most often money or drugs, okay? I think that distinction is helpful. So all sex trafficking is sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is not sex trafficking until the perpetrator is organizing transactions and receiving something of value for what they see the victim, what they're forcing the victim to do, in layman's terms, okay? So this is very important when it comes to minors. We no longer need evidence of force, fraud, or coercion, okay? We are so thrilled to see this exception for minors, because previously what was happening, things like child prostitution, survival sex, child pornography, child self-exploitation, all those things were in this gray area, because if a kid wanted to do it, it wasn't child trafficking, okay? And this was a huge problem, because when they go into court, guess what happens? They're terrified to tell the truth, right? Because their trafficker is going to hurt them, going to kill them, going to whatever if they don't tell the court, I wanted to sell my body, okay? And so we are really moving away from the term child pornography, child exploitation, because it's not an appropriate term. Just last week, okay, just last week, I cannot believe it, I was talking to a rural area law enforcement superior, I'll put it that way. So, and he just said, well, do you serve kids who are self-exploiting and self-prostitution? And these are no longer acceptable terms. If you are in law enforcement, if you are a victim advocate, these are not acceptable terminologies. And if whatever you're seeing as self this or self that, it is child trafficking, and this needs to be in your arsenal, because there are literally law enforcement superiors, there are judges, and attorneys who still don't think self-prostitution is child trafficking. Okay, and what you need in your arsenal is right here. First paragraph, second part. Okay, children are exempt from force, fraud, or coercion. If somebody is buying and selling them, this is child trafficking, okay? And you need to stand your ground in the court system. It's not self this, self that. It is child trafficking, and we are in the 21st century, and we need to get on board with this. So we are so glad to see that minors don't need force, fraud, or coercion. It's a totally eliminating a gray area in the court system to move forward on child trafficking cases. If they're being bought, if they're being sold, doesn't matter what the kid says, it's child trafficking. Someone needs to be prosecuted, okay? The child needs to be removed from that person. So child sexual abuse material is another term for what we're seeing here, and maybe a more appropriate term for some of the other things that people are saying. Commercial sexual exploitation. Let me go back to CSAM. Okay, child sexual exploitation material. Let me put it this way. When you're abusing a child in a room, okay, there's sexual activity taking place, right? When you have a pornographic video or image of a child, what is somebody doing in a room by themselves? They're literally performing a sexual act with the phone, on a minor on the phone. It is not child pornography. It is child sexual abuse material, because that is what is happening on the other side to the child on the screen. I know that's graphic. It is child sexual abuse material, and that is what it is. Commercial sexual exploitation of children is just kind of refers to a wider range of crimes and activities about the exploitation, abuse of children for the financial benefit. These are some of those forms that were really inappropriate terminology, but you know, if it's not textbook trafficking, but it's more of the exploitation, that kind of stuff. CSEC, commercial sexual exploitation of children, is another term to just keep in your arsenal for what is happening. So victim demographics, we are seeing in Kentucky, ages 12 to 17 years old are the majority of victims that are being trafficked, okay? Sadly, no age is unimpacted. If you look at the DCBS annual reports on human trafficking, you will find infants and children being trafficked. And I know earlier, what I really should have said about 5 minutes ago is this session can be very triggering. I know your work, you're on the front line. I know you've developed thick skin over time. But these are children we're talking about, and many of you probably have children or nieces and nephews, or are bonded to the children you serve. I want to just give you permission and freedom at any time to enter in and feel for these children. And if that means pausing the video and walking away and taking a deep breath and getting a drink of water, I invite you and give you permission to do that, because we need to continue to feel this for our children. But I do want to give you advance notice that this will be a heavy session, and I know you're trained on self-care. Please take those steps throughout this time. So, yeah, we have seen even infants being trafficked. I got a call last year about a very, very young victim that was sold away, literally sold away by his parents. Horrendous. We are seeing a lot of the missing youth are being trafficked. The statistics vary from state to state. I sat down in Louisville with one of the group homes, and they said to me, "Do you see the apartments across the street?" Yeah. We're pretty sure traffickers rent out those apartments and watch for runaway kids from the group home. And another group home in Louisville said to me, yeah, we have girls that are making plans with their traffickers, and they know on the 10th day at noon at their stay, they're meeting at the corner, and it's a fast pickup. They run, they go. So we are seeing runaway youth are being picked up by traffickers. If you have a packed bag and you're on the streets of Louisville, traffickers know you're vulnerable, know you have no place to stay. No one's checking in. Homeless youth, runaway youth are totally at risk here. We are seeing 94% of trafficked youth have a prior history in the child welfare system. This tells us that our youth who are abused, neglected, homeless, running away, they've seen drugs, they've seen alcohol, they've seen crimes in their home, a breakdown in their home. The youth who are already so vulnerable are the ones that traffickers are targeting and going after. We have referrals of all kinds, children from the richest homes in Kentucky, but we still are seeing the majority do have some type of breakdown in the home. Very vulnerable youth are the ones that we need to be supporting, and those are your youth. I had a police officer come into my office about 2 years ago, and she said to me, I'm so happy to be here and talk to you and hear about what you do, but I am not coming across trafficked youth. And, you know, I just said, well, do you come across runaway and homeless youth? Because 1 in 3 are picked up by a trafficker within 48 hours in Louisville. Do you come across system-involved youth? Because over 90% of those youth who are being trafficked have a history in the system. And I said, if you're coming across these youth, you're coming across trafficked youth. And about 3 weeks later, she called me. She said, can I come back in to your office? I believe I'm seeing trafficked youth. And this is from an LMPD officer. We are seeing boys and girls. We're seeing at least 200 cases being investigated in Kentucky every year. Not all of them are being substantiated, but this I propose to you. When you see the screeners that we have in Kentucky, we're getting better. We're getting better. But even if the screeners are getting better and the people don't recognize trafficking, the frontliners administering the screeners, basically the ones we're catching in 200 investigations a year, we're hardly getting the reality of what's actually happening when you see the screeners and you see that people have no training or understanding. I had a call from a third group home in Kentucky in Louisville last year who said, we screened this girl with the Vera screening tool and she tested no for trafficking, and we're not sure. Do you want to come in and talk to her? So a screener says no. Guess what a 30-minute conversation says? I'm being trafficked. I just didn't know what she meant. And so we have to realize we're investigating 200 cases a year at least, but when you realize that the frontliners don't know how to talk to the youth through the screener and the victims don't know they're trafficking victims, we are barely scratching the surface on realizing the scale of child trafficking in Kentucky, okay? And this is how I propose it, okay? People want hard, cold facts on trafficking. Guess what? We're not going to get that with the screeners we have, with how obscure and elusive it is. We're never going to have realistic statistics on child trafficking. Okay, never. But this I submit to you. If Kentucky is third in the nation for child abuse and neglect, if we have over 10,000 children in the child welfare and foster care system, and we rank among the top 10 worst states for opioid and drug use, and all of those factors are risk factors for child trafficking, I can tell you we have spiking record high child trafficking cases, because when the risk factors are out the roof, guess what? Child trafficking is too. And so we have to quit looking just for child trafficking statistics and know Kentucky is a hot spot. We are seeing a massive crossover with juvenile justice, okay? let's see here. We had a referral last year, and there was a very young girl, again, in Louisville, who was being trafficked and didn't know it because she was in love with the trafficker, and guess what? He at least let her party and try drugs and alcohol, right? And what happened was at like 14 years old, he said, I'm going to teach you how to drive. So she learns how to drive. Guess what? Then as she's turning tricks, which is a word for, the trafficking, with the buyers, as she's turning tricks, she steals cars, So she ends up, in the court system, all that kind of stuff. And several instances later, the FBI is like, honey, you're being trafficked. And we met her, and she had no idea she was a trafficking victim. Now she knows. And so here's the thing is thank goodness we're at a point now where you can no longer, like, children are not being arrested for child trafficking. Okay, they're not being arrested for that. What they're being arrested for is crimes related to the exploitation, like theft or selling drugs, and getting detained for those reasons. And because they're a bad kid or done this or that so many times, the court workers, the judges, they're just looking at them as this youth that's never going to change, and not realizing someone out there is forcing them to do this, coercing them to do this. And I asked that little girl across the table, she said, I like my life the way it is. And we just said to her, well, I totally get that, until the day comes when it's not so fun anymore, because things get really scary really fast and you can't get out. And all of a sudden her face changes and she goes, I like my life. I like the way it is. I know what you mean. And from a girl to go, I love partying, I love sex, to being terrified of, you're right, there are moments I almost died and it wasn't fun. She said, I didn't want to steal the cars, but he said he was going to hurt me if I didn't, and I believed him. Okay, so we have to realize how many youth are going through the juvenile justice system with all these crimes that are actually involved with trafficking, and we're not catching the trafficking, we're only catching the crimes, and what disservice that is to our youth. If you have truant youth, dropout youth, youth who are skipping school, highly at risk for trafficking, because they're probably addicted to drugs, or there's another person in the picture who they're spending their time with and their long weeks away with. So we are seeing that most human trafficking victims drop out of school between grades 8 to 10. So we have got to keep an eye on youth who are almost truant or truant, all that kind of stuff. These three categories are the three methods that human trafficking happens, okay? And I really want to break these down for you, because when you think of human trafficking, you have probably been taught mostly about the first two columns, which is force and fraud. Okay, the entertainment industry continues to put these before our eyes. And people continue to, when they come in to do human trafficking trainings, they continue to do a very large-scale trafficking training. And guess what? Force and fraud are the least common forms that United States teenagers are at risk for. If you have migrant youth, refugee youth, it might be a little bit more present in those populations, but for United States teenagers, we have been taught to look for the extreme scenarios of force and fraud, and today we are seeing those are the least common forms, and the most common form is coercion. And here's the thing, is coercion is the most difficult one to catch, because it flies under the radar. And I want you to consider this. I'm going to hold up my phone. 20 years ago, if someone wanted to kidnap me, traffic me, whatever, they had to leave their house to do that, right? They had to work really hard to kidnap me, to traffic me in public, right? And today, it has never been easier to traffic youth and get away with it because all of our youth are in the same place at the same time without supervision. And that is on social media. If a child has a phone, okay, I'm not a paranoid person. I'm being realistic. If a child has a phone and they're out there on Snapchat and TikTok and whatever, DMing and engaging with people at all hours of the night, unsupervised, it's the same as standing out on the streets of Miami at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night with no mommy. It is the same. Our children are at the same place at the same time without supervision and are highly, highly vulnerable to people targeting them. And so coercion is what our teens are most at risk for, okay? And when I speak of coercion and exploitation, I want you to think and imagine about the old time marionette puppets, the ones that had like the string attached to them, and what happens is the puppeteer is pulling on the strings and like making them do whatever they want. That is what coercion and exploitation and manipulation feel like and look like. You don't even know what's happening, because when someone can pull on the strings of your needs, your dreams, and your vulnerabilities and your feelings, they can make you do almost anything they want you to do without even realizing it. The common factor with these victims is that they are looking for a better life and looking to escape their current life. So when you look at these three photos under the coercion method, what you're going to notice is that the trafficker has identified those things and is puppeteering or pulling on those strings. So teens who want drugs or alcohol, those end up actually, being used to lure them. Hey, you can come party with me, but it ends up being something to control them and to confuse them and to make them forget, right? We're seeing runaway and homeless youth who are desperate for a place to stay, for a home, for basic needs and provision. We are seeing the romantic scenario. They're looking for love, and someone promises to love them. And so we are seeing so much of the Romeo pimping or Romeo trafficking occurring among our teenagers. And I want to play a video very quickly to kind of really help this sink in. Romeo trafficking is when a trafficker has identified a youth and basically steps in as the pillar of their life. All their answers in one place, meeting their circumstantial needs, their financial needs, their emotional needs, with promises of love, and I'll take care of you. So we're gonna watch a video very quickly. There is one instance of violence. I will prepare you, and we will debrief shortly after.
Can anyone tell me what the different chromosome is for a male versus a female? Yes.
XX is female and XY is male.
Correct.
This is the loose from here.
No, it's
It's right. That's important. We're trying to study.
What is this?
Nothing.
What is this? What are you doing?
It's nothing.
Who is that?
Nobody.
Who is that? Who are you testing?
Nobody.
So you didn't tell your parents that you were coming over here tonight, right? Hey, it's gonna be fun. Come over here.
I want to ask you, in watching that video, how many of your youth, past, present, who you recognize in that video. We see in that video a very young girl who fell in love, and while this video is 3 minutes long, it probably represents 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. She falls in love, and as the relationship evolves, she realizes who he is and what he wants, and now she's so deep and so isolated she can't get out. You saw the abuse and violence, and when she stands up for herself, she becomes hurt, right? You saw the drugs and alcohol were maybe used for a teenager who wanted to party are now being used to control her and kind of, you know, she's not on planet Earth, she's not inside, she's checked out. You saw a lifestyle of isolation and secrecy. You know, no one knows where she is, what she's doing, who she's with, where she's going, where she's staying, right? Because he has convinced her to cut everybody out of her life. You saw the branding, which is very common, especially when the person has gang involvement, to brand the victims. And when you're 16 and you're drunk and you're in love and somebody's like, baby, get my name, you don't realize you're being branded. You wake up and realize that was a bad mistake. You don't realize it's part of him breaking you down and making you submissive and compliant, not considering your value. You saw she's sleeping and engaging and having transactions with other men, and he is the one coordinating and managing and keeping the money. These are the things, and one of the main problems is the sexting, okay? We talk to my youth about this, because when she thinks, oh, I'm just sexting because every other guy I've ever dated or talked to or fooled around with has asked me to sex them, you know, here's what's happening is traffickers are gaining these sexual images and videos for two things. Number one, they're using them on, you know, the Craigslist and all that stuff. When you book an appointment, you know, they text it out, and that's how you know who you're getting and what you want to buy. They're used on the dark web to basically sell the product, right? And the other thing is, those, maybe like, you can traffic her two ways. You can traffic the victim in person by their body, and you can also make more money by trafficking the images on Snapchat and selling them for Snap Cash and Bitcoin on the dark web. We have victims that their images and videos are plastered on the dark web in Europe, and the FBI can't get them down because of one mistake. Send it one time, and the trafficker can use it over and over again to make money, and your body was never sold, but now your images, right? It's also used for leverage and blackmail, because if that little girl ever says, I'm leaving you, he'll say, no, you're not, because I'll leak this and make sure it ruins your life. Scholarships down the drain, you'll be blacklisted at school by your friends, by your family, you'll never get the job you want because of all of this. And I want you to consider the dramatic change in personality and persona from the beginning to the end. In the beginning, she looks young. She looks 14, 16. In the end, she is dressed beyond, the maturity of her age. She is not happy. She's hardly in there. And that is the effect of trauma, of drugs, of abuse, of emotional trauma and manipulation, of confusion. Our victims are very confused. I fell in love with this guy and I don't know what to do, right? And I want you to consider this of why a victim does not leave. If she is useful to him now, making him money, and he abuses her when she's useful to him, what happens if she's not useful and suddenly she becomes a threat to the operation? What then, right? Because if he abuses her when she's useful, how much worse will he do when she's not useful? We're going to take a break and circle back. Take a breather, please. We have a lot more to discuss. And you guys are on the front line of this issue. And I'd love for you to just take a break and come back ready to feel one more time for 40 more minutes, feel for these youth, and to really wrap your heart around this issue. So please do what you need to do in this break to come back with a heart that's rested and open for part 2.